Hi, I'm Rhiannon Faith, and I want to tell you a story. So, it's been a while since I've shared anything, and not for lack of interest, but certainly there have been reasons. And so, I wanted to tell you a story, or I guess a series of stories, about God given purpose. So, it was really kind of a poignant bring it back together and share again moment because some of what I'm going to share with you is a lot of why or how I came to a point of the pause button. But really, it was an act of disobedience. And so I need to be honest with myself and with those of you who are listening. That is really what was going on. So that sounds really dramatic. It's not as scandalous as that might sound, but so what it reminded me of was this quote by Mother Teresa. She said that, and I don't know, I probably said this before, but that she had gone through various seasons where God was quiet and people had asked her, they were asking, do you always hear from the Lord? And she'd said, no, there are lots of times that I don't hear from him. Well, what do you do then? It's the last thing that he told me, more or less the summary of it. And so, what that reminded me of is that if he's told you to start, then you go until he tells you to stop. So he told me to do this. He told me to share these stories and be open in this way. And then I pushed the pause button, which was an act of disobedience. And so it has burdened me for that time, although there were still good reasons. I'm justifying, whatever. So honestly, it was licking my wounds. So as I sort of shared before, there had been quite a lot of things that were going on, and those lot of things were bringing a whole heap of stress and challenges. And as much as I wanted to just rally and get over it, honestly, I was licking my wounds and beat up a bit by all of it. And it took some time to be quiet and still and reflect on what I could learn from all that I had experienced, because there was no reason to let those life experiences go without value. And the greatest value is to turn them into some sort of lesson or takeaway. And so I needed some time to reflect, but more of the time was spent wound licking, which honestly is a bit of a pointless exercise at a certain point. It just takes you off track and off goal, and that's really sort of where I found myself. So it reminded me that you don't stop carrying out the purpose that God has given you just because some people have caused you pain. And pain can have value, and pain can have purpose, and life is painful. And those things have always been put to purpose for me, and so I'm confident they'll continue to be. And in this case, of course, it was as well. But I really was at this state of just such distress and heaviness. And so I had this wonderful opportunity to go on a very special trip back to Knoxville, Tennessee. I lived there when I was a kid from first grade to third grade, and then part of seventh and most of eighth grade. And I really loved Knoxville for a lot of reasons. And also there were a lot of challenges that happened while we were there, which is something of a running theme for my childhood for another time. But there were lots of beautiful moments that happened while we were there, and lots of really fun memories and places that held significance. So while we were there, I got to show my wonderful man around, and all of these different sites and places. And one of the things I really wanted to do was go back to the church we had last attended when we lived there, which was Broadway Baptist Church. That was the church that I was baptized at, and really a special place, a special congregation, primarily older folks there at the time, and they had just towards the end of our time there, they had brought on a new, much younger pastor with young kids. They were like toddlers, which was, when I say older congregation, I mean super 70s and above. And not that that's old, okay, but it was a lot older than, and the church was dying off, and had been the grandchildren of people that had been there for all of these years. In any event, I really loved the church though, and it was very different than anything we had attended before. We had mostly been at more Calvary Chapel and casual sort of dynamics, so this was pretty stark contrast. Southern Baptist Church, like long robes. Our hymnal robes were, the very formal Southern style. Church was an affair on Sundays, and then go downstairs and have a big, wonderful meal after service. And it was just a really special place to be a part of. And for that time of season, it was really wonderful. And like I said, I was baptized there. And I actually called the church a number of years ago and asked, hey, do you happen to have these records? For whatever reason, I didn't have it written down. And they looked it up. They went to the archives, looked it up, called me back. It was about a week later, and told me the date. And that was so incredibly special, because it was like, it's like finding your birthday or adoption day or something. It has such meaning and value, and it was such a special marked occasion, and a choice that I made entirely of my own volition, and it was so really a daunting experience, because I wore this really like high to the neck and down to the floor white robe, and went into the pool, and it was in front of the congregation. And so I sing in the choir, but it's kind of different when it's literally all eyes on you and you're wearing white, which becomes see-through in water. I'm not sure who thought that was a good idea, but I mean, I get it, I guess. So anyhow, we made a point to, when we were leaving, actually, was kind of like our final, okay, we have a couple more minutes to wander about. So we went to the house that we used to live in, which looks literally the exact same as it did when we left in 8th grade, which was a while ago. And then went over to the church, which was right around the corner. And, lots of times we would just walk to church. But when we were there, it was just reminiscing, and it was very, it was really special to be there. And I went up the steps to one of the main entrances, and there's this really beautiful, I took tons of pictures. I didn't even ask anybody to open the church, because what I needed of that moment and experience was exactly what I received. It was like a weekday that we were doing this, but I looked, and there's this really large, I don't even know what you would call it, but art piece, like tower thing, I don't know, like the bell tower, but it's separate from the church building, and it has the cross at the top of it, and engraved into it was the verse Matthew 11:28, come to me all you who are weak and weary, and I will give you rest. And it was in the King James version that it was written on the thing, so that's not the King James version. But I just totally lost it, and I really needed that verse in that moment for everything that I was feeling, and it's just such an accurate representation of my heart and this heaviness that I've been carrying. And I thought about the season we had been in when we lived there, and how I missed that was there and written in that way. But it was really just such a beautiful reminder, and so personal, and it made me think about the extravagance, God's love for us, and how it just goes through these incredible means and methods to connect with us. So here I am. I'm excited, about this experience of being back there and getting to show off where I had been, and like how exciting that was, but also just really honest to my heart, and giving me that encouragement and reminding me, I'm your place of refuge. And so that was really, it was a lot. I sat there and cried for a bit. I'm sure somebody was watching from a door in the office going, what is with this crazy lady? Thankfully, no one came out to confront me on my oddity, which was good. But it was a really special moment. And so it just kind of reminded me, because it was still very much in the season of dealing with this heaviness and all that had come from it, but really hoping that the end of that was near. And it was, but that wasn't my present reality yet. And I did not know when relief was coming, although it did come not too long thereafter. And so it just reminded me again, don't stop what God has called me to do until He tells me to stop. And then came home, and that following weekend, I went to a women's event and connected with girlfriends that I haven't seen in a couple of years, having moved to the east side of town, and some of them actually I hadn't seen for even longer. And certainly with COVID, there had been a lot of people that I hadn't really connected with very much. It was kind of like a really fabulous girls' reunion, and that was really incredible. And listening to an amazing couple of speakers and just connecting in that way. And so one of the things they did at this event was hand out keys as sort of a gift, a reminder. There was a verse written on each one, and so you didn't get to like get them passed out to you or hand them out or pick through them. So the ladies each there were a handful of ladies at the front of the sanctuary, and they had trays, and on the trays they had these keys, like antique looking keys, and a little tag on it, and on the tag it had a verse. And so Lindsay Petrie was speaking, and she was saying, we have prayed over every one of these ladies have prayed over them, and they've prayed over the verses, and the verse that you get, that is the verse that is for you. And I was sitting in the front row, because I'm all about the front row. I don't want to miss anything, and I don't want to be distracted. So sitting in the front row, and I waited for a bit before going up, like it was kind of near to the end of the time. And I went up, and I went to get my key. And it was funny because the one that I had grabbed came up, and there was another key kind of attached to it. And I didn't look. I said, oh, wow, I think this is the one that I'm supposed to take, the one that was the hanger on. And so I took that one, and I put the other one back. And the gal had said, well, as I was doing this, the gal said, I think they both might be for you. But I didn't want to be greedy, so I put the other one back. And I didn't want to look, because I decided, that wasn't the verse that was meant for me. So anyways, I get back to my chair, I sit down, and I look at that piece of paper, the little tag that's on it, and my verse was Matthew 11:28 and 29. And I full ugly cried at that point, because holy moly, like, really? God, I get it. Okay, that verse is for me. I hear you. But it was such a beautiful confirmation, and it's just so many emotions that came with all of that in such a precious way. And so I I left just overwhelmed. That was like one of the final things of the night, and I just left overwhelmed with God's goodness and the joy it was to be able to be there. And just to have that confirmation again, the specificity of that verse being relevant to me that time, that season. It's easy to sort of dismiss a message that God would give you. Well, that was really, for lots of other people. That was engraved on the wall. I mean, obviously that's been there a while. Lots of people have heard that or needed that. This isn't about me, but it was legitimately about me, and it was a message for me, and I saw it at that time to bring me encouragement. And so it just overwhelmed with gratitude and thanksgiving. And so it was exciting to be able to share that, and so exciting to be able to call and share that with Tim, and to have that be such an important part of our relationship, and to have that excitement. I think it was one of the first women's events that because a lot of stuff kind of fell apart with COVID, but I used to always have such heaviness when I would go to a women's event, because I wanted to come home and share like my excitement over all of that. And that just was not something that I could do. It left me sad and disappointed. And so to be able to share that is really just such an incredible gift. I can't even describe how amazing that is. And so I kind of dove in really, really recognizing the need for continued encouragement. So I'd listened to a couple of TED Talks, and of course, like in the Word all the time. And not that the one is a replacement for the other, like the TED Talk isn't a replacement, but I like to hear from a variety of sources, and I know that sometimes a word will just hit you different from a different source. So one of the ones I had listened to, and I apologize because I'm not stealing someone's original work or ideas, but she was talking about this research that she did, and I didn't write down her name. I'm sure I have it on my TED Talk list because I probably saved it as a favorite. But she was talking about the people who live wholehearted. And that's the thing. That's who I am, and that's how I live, and that's why these challenges that I was experiencing created so much heaviness in my heart, because it hurt because I care. And it was heavy because I was carrying it. And not all of it was mine to carry. Okay, I definitely get that. But it was heavy because I wouldn't set it down and I wouldn't walk away, because for me, it was to be all in, because I don't actually operate on a half end, well, as long as everything's going great or the circumstances are okay. I am all in. I am wholehearted, which also means that I have my whole heart at risk of being broken and hurt. And I remember years and years ago, I mean, really long time ago, I had a boyfriend who was really mad at me for living like that. He's like, you care so much about all these other people, and half of them don't care nearly anything really about you. They're not thinking about you as they're making these choices. And that was probably true for a lot of them, but that was their choice. And I made mine. Mine was to be all in and to be fully present and to love generously and all of that. But they missed out by not living wholehearted. I didn't miss out. I didn't regret loving sincerely and authentically and being who I am and who God has designed me to be because someone else didn't reciprocate. Because that wasn't, it's the whole point of unconditional love, is that there isn't an expectation or a fixed requirement for reciprocity or even any response, honestly, any particular response. You just love wholeheartedly. And again, you risk all of your heart with that, but the risk is worth it, I think. And so with that comes another, that was like a piggyback TED Talk, and possibly the same gal, but she was talking about living in that state of vulnerability. And so that was kind of the catalyst of reminding myself that I'm being disobedient by not being vulnerable and honest, and not living in my purpose, because God has called me to be vulnerable and sharing these things in this forum, which is a lot. And it's not because of the people, but it's recorded. It exists for all of eternity. Well, I mean, until the new technology or whatever. But I'm putting myself out there in quite a level of vulnerability that I actually would prefer, mostly not to. But this is what he asked me to do. And so I care more about living a life of obedience than living a life of perceived comfort. And so here I am. And so my final takeaway in all of this was, and I'm sure their lessons will continue to reveal themselves, but when we experience hardships and challenges, we can choose to get wiser and not harder. And so I can take the turmoil and the stress and the strain, which weighed down my heart and my soul tremendously for quite a long period of time, and I could become embittered by that and the treatment, how harsh it was, how awful, and focus in on all of that. Or I could say, this is not a person I should trust in the future. This kind of behavior might lead to this kind of behavior again, like looking at how those dominoes sort of fell. And I can be wiser in that, not walled in, but wiser. And so what I was thinking about when I had read that, becoming wiser and not harder, it reminded me, my oldest, and I hope she'll forgive me for sharing this, but she tends to be a little bit emotionally walled in. I love you so much, Cheyenne. But she tends to be a little bit emotionally walled in. And I remember conversations, even when she was quite young, he had to make an appearance. It's my new cat, Raja. Isn't he adorable? Orange moron that he is. You can protect your heart, but you do so at the expense of letting anything else in. So you can wall yourself in, you can brick by brick it all out, wall your heart in, but you don't just keep out the pain, you keep out the goodness as well. And so it hurts to stay open and to stay vulnerable because you're not protected. But you also would miss out on so much if you did that, if you lived that way. And so I don't want to miss out on all of the goodness that God has, and in relationships and getting to know people and friends and family and all of the rest of that. Life is messy, and but it's worth it to get wiser and not harder with all of these life experiences. And so, oh, I'm so naughty. What a jerk. Anyways, that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back again and let me tell you another story. Thanks.